almost ready here? Everybody got their punchki or donuts?
Go for one and be
The whole meal over there.
Mine's been good, thank you.
I don't know what you, I just saw that there's a whole lot of food there.
I warmed the pasta with milk. I stole the milk inside the fridge.
Let's look.
We're in the middle of chapter 6 still.
April 7 is the next.
Sermon on the Plain, right?
Right, okay.
It's number 7.
That's 6, yeah. That's what I said.
Oh, it was 7? Okay.
Here.
Sabi ko, gusto mo simbahan? Okay.
It was just by a fluke that I got it. We're good then? Okay. So, chapter 6, starting in verse 20, the Sermon on the Plain, right? That's where we left off? Did we do 17? We did. We didn't do the. Oh, okay. Okay, so yeah. And Jesus came down with them and stood on a stretch of level ground. A great crowd of his disciples and a large number of the people from all Judea and Jerusalem and the coastal region of Tyre and Sidon came to hear him to be healed of their diseases, and even those who were tormented by unclean spirits were cured. Everyone in the crowd sought to touch him because power came forth from him and healed them all. So he's back up by Capernaum, not too far. And again, we're in that same area where a lot of the teaching and stuff takes place, just to the west of Capernaum, east of Capernaum, just to the east of Capernaum, and between Capernaum and Bethsaida. That's kind of a desolate territory that is open-ended, but the mountains form a natural amphitheater. And so this is the same spot where Matthew recounts the Sermon on the Mount, and there's a church up on the top of the hill called the Church of the Beatitudes. But Luke calls it the Sermon on the Plain. And some scholars would say, well, it's just the reversal of point of view. The other, though, is that the sermon, as much as he taught, he has Beatitudes in there, but he only has 4 compared to 8. He has 4 positive ones, he has 4 negative ones. And so then the question, the positive ones aren't quite the same as the positive ones as Matthew. So I would say from a literary point of view, it's a second sermon. Because it also comes later. The sermon in Matthew's Gospel, the Sermon on the Mount, comes before he chooses the 12. Now, we've just chosen the 12. So this could be at a later time. Again, kind of rehashing some of the same themes, but now with new emphasis because of the other 4 woes that are added to it. But let's get back to the opening of it at hand here. And coming down on the level ground, and a great crowd so you've got disciples and a large number of people from all Judea and Jerusalem. So again, so you're talking this whole area. So you have when Luke is talking about Judea, in this sense, he's talking about all of Israel. Okay, Judea is actually down here, but he's talking when this is all of Israel, the territory, the kingdom of Israel, both the north and the south, and Samaria lies in between. So you have the Jews in the north, you have the Jews in the south, and then the mixed people in between, which the Samaritans were half Jews, half Gentiles. Jerusalem is down here, so he says all of Judea and Jerusalem. And again, that's fuzzy geography because you think, well, Judea, but Luke is really kind of referring to all this. So he kind of clouds it. Sometimes when he talks about Judea, he actually says Judah when he means what we would call Judea, because that would be the kingdom of Judah back, the southern kingdom. And when he says Judea, he actually is talking about all of what we would call Israel. And then he includes 2 more places, Tyre and Sidon, on the coast, which are traditionally in Lebanon. So it's not just the Jews who are coming to listen to him, but it's Gentiles who are coming to listen to him. And remember, the coastlands of Lebanon always had a connection with Israel. Solomon went and got the cedar wood to build the temple from the forests of Lebanon. So Lebanon and Israel always had this connection, and even now, when something goes wrong in Israel, what do? They invade Lebanon and take over the southern portion of Lebanon because that's where the terrorists are to take care of things.
But Lebanon, aren't they Jews? And you're okay, Christians?
Lebanon is half Christian, half Muslim.
Okay.
Lebanon is considered a Muslim country by many, but it was actually, up until very recently, it was actually half Christian, half Muslim. And of course, with the various wars and things, the number of the Christians leave. The Christians tended to be the richer people in places like Lebanon and in Iraq, and so then they would leave. And so, the first Iraqis who came living here in the United States were not Muslim terrorists; they were Christian Iraqis, and so they built Christian churches and in the Assyrian Catholic churches that you'll find up along Divine Avenue and things like that.
They were Christians?
Yes, yes.
I thought they're all Muslims.
No, they're
And
not.
that was the, if you want to say that one good thing about Saddam Hussein was he maintained order in the sense that the society remained balanced. There were 5 million Christians living in Iraq. Not anymore. I think it's down to about 1 million. Most of them have fled because when the more extreme religious people took over, then they started going after the Christians. Muslims don't, by the Quran, don't drink alcohol. Christians do, and so the Christians had like the alcohol shops, and so the Muslims would go and get their alcohol, but they couldn't sell it, and they would hide to buy it. It's the same thing. Just like in Israel, you have because you have Christians, Muslims, and Jews all living together in Israel. Stores are open every day because the Muslims are off on Friday, the Jews are off on Saturday, the Christians are off on Sunday. So there's always somebody selling something. You can always find something. And then what one group doesn't sell because it's a religious no-no, the other group will sell. So, and so then the many people who are less connected to their religion, it's like if you watch Big Bang Theory and the Indian guy eats beef sandwiches but not in front of his dad.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was going to ask a question. Are they allowed to marry out of their religion? I see some of them do it and some of them don't. Or is it against their laws to do that?
Again, depends on how the leaders are. There are strict interpretations that would say no, and that you have that a Muslim who marries a Christian, the Christian must convert.
That's
Yeah.
But you also have again, like in Saudi Arabia, which is an extremely Muslim country, you have a huge number of Filipino Catholics living there, working in the oil fields. The Saudis are no longer working in the oil fields, they import all their labor. And so a number of them are Indians and Filipinos who come over, and many of those are Christians and Catholics, and so they let them have their Mass, but they don't let anybody know they have Mass. So, because technically the only religion allowed in Saudi Arabia is Islam. So they don't advertise it, they don't let it be known, but they also kind of turn a blind eye. So, but if push comes to shove, it's like that Christian woman in Pakistan who got in trouble. She said something and everybody said it was against the Prophet Muhammad, but it really wasn't against the Prophet Muhammad when you look at what she said. But a strict interpretation and someone who doesn't want a Christian around will use that against them. So,
Is that a problem?
yeah. Okay, so you got this whole group of people from everywhere, and they came to hear him. But you notice they're not just coming to hear him, so they're not just coming to listen to speak, but they also want to be healed of their diseases, and then also the unclean spirits. So they're not coming to him just because he's a great speaker. They're coming to him because of the power. And Luke always puts out the power in the sense of everyone in the crowd sought to touch him because power came forth from him. So it's not just that Jesus healed them, but that, again, that sense of the Spirit, that there's this healing moment. So we saw earlier that Jesus was filled with the healing power of the Spirit, and now they talk about the power coming forth from it. It's almost like the Spirit is acting through Jesus, but almost apart from Jesus. So Jesus is busy teaching, and the Spirit's healing those who come around him. So you've got all this set up, and so now you get to the Sermon on the Plain. And the Sermon on the Plain has basically 3 parts to it. The first part is the Beatitude part, which we come to. And also the difference here is you'll see that he raises the stakes in a sense because of the woes. So there's 4 blessings and 4 woes. And when we talk about the blessings, what we translate as the word blessed can be retranslated as either happy or fortunate. So not happy in the sense you're smiling or laughing, but happy in the sense that good things have come to you. So, and again, this is really the original meaning of blessing also, right? A blessing, benediction in Latin, is a good word, or to speak well. And so then bendición in Spanish, but in English, blessing is to speak well of someone. So whether you say, blessed are they, something good has been said for them, or fortunate or happy, however you want to translate that. So there's various translations on that word. Usually it's either happy or blessed, but sometimes it's felicitous.
When I was in Ireland, everybody says God bless instead of saying goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody ever says goodbye. They just say God bless.
So did you count your blessings?
Right. I need them.
Okay.
In
Yes,
Mexico,
they
we
do.
say adios. We always pronounce it adios.
Yeah, not anymore.
We do.
No, it's que la vaya bien, things like that can go well. It's almost like have a good day now, which is awful. But first few times, even now, when sometimes I hear the que la vaya bien, I have to rethink that. It's like, okay, but just because it says may you go well, I'm like, oh, okay, I guess.
We say adios.
Yeah. I usually say nos vemos
Nos vemos ahí en México.
or sí,
Que Dios te
Okay.
bendiga.
And again, if you were leaving the house, children leaving the house, or even spouses leaving the house would ask for a blessing in many places, and especially in Latin countries. So, blessed are you who are poor, for the kingdom of God is yours. Now, you notice that in Matthew, it's blessed are the poor in spirit. Okay? And in Luke, it's just blessed are you who are poor. So, Luke is raising this to a sense that poverty itself is actually a blessing. Remember, that's recounted in Mary's Magnificat. So, he has lifted up the lowly. He's filled the hungry with good things. The rich he has sent away empty. So that just the sense that poverty, even in itself, it has a certain blessing to it. There's a certain fortune to it. And of course, part of that is not because you're poor right now, but because you have something later. The kingdom of God is yours. And you notice that Luke doesn't say will be yours, but is yours. So this connection of poverty to kingship or to live forever is an immediate connection. It's not wait and you'll get your reward, but this is already given to you because of the situation you live in. It's like if a Protestant asks you, "Are you saved?" and most Catholics would say, "Oh, I'm working on it." But from the Protestant point of view, is no, I believe, so I'm saved, and it's immediate. So it's that immediate response. So. When Matthew, when he talks about the poor in spirit, though, again, that basically it's still the same idea that in poverty, but that there's a spiritual connection to being poor, and that is, of course, those who are poor have to depend more on God. And so the opposite is that when people are rich, they think less about God, or they depend less on God because they have more resources to themselves. And so when Matthew adds, or when Jesus adds in Matthew's gospel, blessed are the poor in spirit, the idea is that because you are poor, your spirit is now more connected to God. And that's where Luke has taken this idea too. Blessed you, and now he comes to the now. Blessed are you who are now hungry, for you will be satisfied. He has filled the hungry with good things, the rich he has sent away empty. Blessed are you who are now weeping, for you will laugh. So he's kind of going through, almost backing up what Mary already said in the Magnificat. And blessed are you when people hate you, when they exclude you and insult you and denounce your name as evil on account of the Son of Man. So again, he does the first three. Blessed are you who are poor. Blessed are you who are hungry. Blessed are you who are weeping. He forgets about the, blessed are the meek. Blessed are the peacemakers. He does those three, and then he jumps to the end of the list from Matthew's gospel, which is, blessed are you when they insult you and persecute you and utter every kind of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward will be great in heaven. So the same thing, rejoice and leap for joy. So a little bit more than be glad, right? So what we just simply say is be glad in Matthew's gospel, leap for joy. So it's not meant to be, it's not meant to just kind of sit back. It's to move us into action. And an action that rejoices, not one that is worried about ourselves. For their ancestors treated the prophets in the same way. And again, now he pulls that back. Matthew doesn't do that, but Luke pulls it back to the sense of how they treated the prophets. Luke pulls it back to that relationship that Jesus has. Remember, Jesus is a successor or a son of Adam, a son of David. Pulls it back to that whole sense of historical awareness. And then he goes back and now he does the woes. He does the reverse of this, which is, woe to you who are rich, for you have received your consolation. So he's not saying that riches are a bad thing, but he's saying that if you've got it now, you won't get it later. And the reason you won't get it later is because you don't need it. You don't need God, so if you're not looking for God, how are you going to find God? So those who have too much and they rely only on themselves, they have the resources, they tend to ignore God and then move away. And look at the list of billionaires and look at how many of them are faithful Christians, Catholics or whatever, and you find that many of them have moved away from their own faith or moved away from their lives, moved away from their religious backgrounds. Cardinal George was always very clear about that. He would talk about how the rich need the poor to be saved, because the poor give us an understanding that there's much more to involved in life and in humanity than simply gathering riches for ourselves. And so he would raise money basically by telling me, you need to give this money away, because it will be your downfall.
Share.
It will be your the money is what will condemn you as you pile it up, and then nothing else. And that we find elsewhere in the gospel. Jesus talks about the treasures rotting away, and the worms eating up the treasures. You have nothing left. So, and then woe to you who are filled now, for you will be hungry. The rich he has sent away empty. Woe to you who laugh now, for you will grieve and weep. So again, going back to that sense of what's happening now and what will happen. Whereas the first one with the poor and the rich, that's an immediate thing. So, as I said, if you're poor, you already have the kingdom of God, and here, if you're rich, you already have your consolation. So, in terms of wealth, he puts that as an immediate response. The others are, this will happen in the future. So there's a change going on. And then woe to you when all speak well of you, for their ancestors treated the false prophets in the same way. And again, linking up the treatment of the prophets or the treatment of or the false prophets along with himself. Any questions about the Beatitudes? Yeah.
Every time I read this one, I always feel like the people who are rich or who have some, do they need to feel guilty that they have some? And yet, because sometimes you give to the poor, you basically enable. Someone told me that if you were born poor and you die poor, then it is your problem. I don't know if it's true or not, okay. But I'm kind of curious if this penalizes people who have some. Yeah,
and it's meant to. This particular teaching is meant to be scandalous, particularly those who are comfortable with themselves. Okay, so it's meant to push us away from our comfort zone. I have a person in my old parish who just hated the Gospel of Luke because of this kind of thing. And many times in Luke's Gospel, in many of the parables, we're going to find that there's always a twist, what Henry James would call the turning of the screw. that, you know, you think you got this and then, you know, just cuts right into you and said, oh man, you know, why did you have to go that far? And that's what happens. Jesus, in Luke's gospel, Jesus always seems to go too far and pushes us beyond what would be our comfort zone. And the idea is, yes, you know, the rich should be uncomfortable because you have to look at how you got it and what are you using it for. Again, in a sense of stewardship, and Luke is one of the gospels that you really build a case for stewardship on. In the case of stewardship, stewardship is to recognize that you are blessed, but the blessings that you have are meant to give glory to God. And so now you have to say, okay, so if I have money, am I using that money to give glory to God, or keep me comfortable toward my retirement, or toward my current situation, or to protect me from things that might happen to me but haven't? So, you know, a good example, Bill Gates gave away $25 billion. Huge amount of money. Huge amount, I mean, more money than most people ever dream of, more money than like the next 5 richest people together when he gave it away. He gave away $25 billion to start his charity, and he's given away more since then. But he's still worth $100 billion.
He gives some to the church or no?
I don't know what he gave most of it for educational purposes and HIV and Africa. I mean, it's a good foundation. There's nothing wrong with it. But
So in other words, it's okay to have money as long as you use it for good.
of course, yeah.
It's like, I don't know. Let's suppose like I help some people and they pay me back. Why?
If it's a
Because
loan,
that
then-
says help whoever you can help. And I do it and they pay me back.
right,
Why? I'm not
Because
supposed to help no more.
because they don't want to be indebted to you.
They don't want to what?
They don't want to be indebted to you. Yeah, they don't want to be.
Agradecidos.
They don't want to be in your debt. They don't want to feel like they owe you.
But God pay me good, right?
Well, God pays you, yeah. But that's the thing, and that's sometimes why when you do something, you try not to. You know, sometimes if I do something nice for someone, which is rare, but when I do something nice for someone, they, you know, and then they want to do something nice for me.
Yeah.
Well, from my point of view, it wipes out the good because then it's just even Steven. It's just a business transaction.
Yeah, okay.
And I'd rather do good that stood by its own. But you know,
It happens, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but isn't that what life's supposed to be about, give and take anyway? I don't
No,
think,
but
I don't really think there is any kind of even Steven anyway, period. I don't
Well,
think
it's,
there
yeah,
really
it's not
is.
really, but give and take that's the worldview of life. The Christian view of life is give.
But
Give me
if
some
you
more.
have to watch who you give to, because I don't know, if you keep giving to the poor, the people that ask money from you from everywhere, shall I give or not give? Because sometimes I would even know what they're gonna use it for.
Well,
No, you
yeah,
don't.
well, yeah,
That's not
yeah.
my
But
business.
that's
Well, no, she did make a good point though, because, you know, I volunteered at a homeless shelter and it can be good and bad. I was like really surprised one day when I was you know, on the south side it cost like $1 to take a shower, and I gave the guy $1 to take a shower every time he came. And we were really surprised. He came in one day and he bought me and this other volunteer some White Castle hamburgers to make up for it. But then there were other times where people were asking for money and then they spent the money on drugs. So it depends.
Yeah,
I know
A lot
where
of
she's
people
coming from.
use the money for therapy. And you have to be careful, you have to be really.
You don't
But
know. It's hard to say
Yeah,
you
it's
don't
very
know
hard.
the
It's
person.
hard to estimate.
Then you're judging.
it's always a guess,
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I have those
and you
people.
take your best shot. But the reality of it is, if you're giving the money and they use it for something that they shouldn't use it for, it's their sin, not yours.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I
Now,
know,
if
but
you know that they're going to buy the drugs and they shouldn't have the drugs, then you're enabling them to do something wrong.
Yeah.
But in most cases, you don't know, and if they tell you I need food, then, and you give them money, and then they use it for something else, that's not your
There should
sin.
be money
But
for
if
them
they,
to
but if
take
they
a shower
did need the
somewhere.
food, or if they were going to buy the food with it, and you didn't give it to them, then it's your sin. For not helping, well, I mean, that's the thing, so it's a judgment call. There's no easy answer to that.
Yes, very
You know,
You know that way.
there's a guy that I know who begs on the corner at Ashland and Bridge, and he's been there for like 10 years begging. Right. And every now and again he'll have a new hat on, but people could be giving him a new hat. But other than that, he doesn't look like he has stocks, and yet every day he's there begging. And so I presume he's feeding himself or his family or whatever, but it's a shame that in 10 years he hasn't found someone to give him a job, or maybe he can't get a job. I don't know. But, you know, that's just, you know, that's an example, so he's always there. Then you hear the stories, the bad stories of people who beg all summer long in the city and then go down to live in Florida for the winter, you know, and have a house or something.
Right.
But again, you don't know, and so you take your best shot and you give it with a prayer, and that's the best you can do.
Well,
You pray that what you're doing is the right thing to do.
I have these people that are homeless. I have 1, 2, 3. Before you know it, every day 20 of them would come to eat. It's okay, feed them fine. But then they run away with all my stuff.
Okay, so
When I
again,
turn my back, they run away with my coffee maker.
of course. So then you have to do this with a certain amount of wisdom and prudence.
Yeah, you do.
Then we have to think.
Right, you have to be prudent about it, but
And
you,
also don't do whatever you have to do because of what other people say. Because I go home to the Philippines and have people that I thought were poor. My brothers and sisters all get mad with me. He says she's nuts, she's crazy, she's giving away all her money.
okay, well, let's move on to this. Let's keep going. So, because now we're going to make it even tougher for you, okay? So you thought that was bad enough. Now we're making it tougher. So now we come to the second part, which is now moving us beyond what you normally think. And there's a line in Tobit that says, do not do to someone else what you would hate them to do to you. And they call that the silver rule. Okay, that you basically treat others as you would have them treat you. Okay, but Jesus goes beyond that in terms of the golden rule. So, but to you who hear, so again, now he's got this whole group of people, and they're there, but not all of them are there to hear him, right? Some of them are there to get something out of him. They want to be healed. They want to get the spirit out of them. So he's addressing the crowd, probably more specifically to the apostles and the disciples. And so we chose the 12 apostles last week, right? And what I forgot to mention, so apostles are people who are sent. The word means to send. And disciples are people who learn. So you have his disciples who are there to learn. So not all the disciples become apostles. So a disciple is a student or a learner, and an apostle is someone who's sent. So he's obviously going to speak directly to the apostles or to those disciples who are willing to learn this. But not everybody in the crowd. So, but to you who hear, I say, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you.
That is so hard.
That exactly. So now you thought it was bad enough, this thing here about giving to the
It's
poor.
the hardest thing.
Now you're upping the stakes even more. To you, do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. To the person who strikes you on one cheek, offer the other one as well. And from the person who takes your cloak, do not withhold even your tunic. When we went through that passage at RCIA the other day, last week or whatever, somebody asked me what a tunic is. Everybody know? So the tunic is the inner garment. So like normally we see a picture of Jesus, he's got this white robe on and he's got this like red thing on over it. Okay, so the outer cloak would be the red thing that you could cover yourself all with, and it'd be heavier and it'd warm you up at night. The white robe, kind of like what we wear at church, the alb, what we call an alb here at church. The tunic is just simply a robe, the basic robe that people would wear over themselves first. So it's your first layer of clothing.
It'd be like church pajamas going to spend, right?
Yeah, but it's something you'd wear during the daytime, so.
No, exactly. yeah.
Right, so it's like if you see some of the Muslim guys on Friday going off to their temple, you'd see them wearing like a white robe. Sometimes they're wearing it over their pants or whatever, sometimes the guys aren't wearing, you see their bare feet or whatever. But that's it, it's just basically a simple white robe. So, if they ask for your cloak, the outer garment, give them your tunic as well, give them everything. So again,
Then you wouldn't have anything to
the only thing you have on is your loincloth, your underwear, basically.
Oh, no, no.
If you're wearing one, yeah. Yeah, so so we're again, Jesus is pushing us pretty far.
Yeah.
Okay? Give to everyone who asks of you. Okay, so now, you have all kinds of reasons why you shouldn't, but that's not what the gospel says. Give to everyone who asks of you. And from the one who takes what is yours, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. So, the Tobit was don't do what you wouldn't want done to you, but now this is done positively. Do to others what you would want them to do to you. So you want someone to treat you well, then you treat somebody else well first. So not give and take, but give.
To receive.
You're not even looking to receive. You're just looking to give in the way that you would like them to give to you.
Yeah.
Which of course is in a sense the essence of a Christian marriage, isn't it? That each person in the marriage is called to give themselves entirely to the other, not because they're getting something back. So marriage isn't supposed to be 50-50, it's supposed to be 100-100. And that's the essence of a Christian marriage, that the people walk into it to give themselves entirely to one another. But,
Yeah, but at least you're not waiting till they do something bad.
right, well,
Something happens.
So and then he challenges that on a level of what does the world think? So if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. So when we say, oh yeah, well, you love me, I'll love you, it's give and take. Well, anybody can do that. Sinners will do that. Yeah.
But between loving and liking, I can love a person, pray for a person, help a person.
And not like them?
I don't necessarily have to like them.
Well,
I
that is
enjoy
true.
their company. But I can love them in a way. I don't know. It's just for me.
Well, what do you mean by that? I don't disagree with you, but what do you mean by that?
I can love a person, pray for that
Which
person.
means what?
Yes. You need to say sharing whatever I can to help this person, but I don't necessarily have to like being with this person. So that's
like
not
their
a Christian, right?
Right.
Or like their ways, the way
Yeah,
they act.
so you don't necessarily have to agree with what they do or what they say, but because they're a human being, you treat them with the same love and respect that you would treat somebody that you do like. And you don't distinguish that. The way we treat one another. So again, we're not talking theory here, we're talking actions, and this is Jesus in action. So in action, our faith should be something that everyone is treated the same. So it's not because they come from the same place as you, it's not because they're a member of your family, it's simply because they're a human being, that they get the same respect and same care for that anybody else would get. And again, that goes against the grain. In the 70s, there was a whole thing, I'm number one, and first it was America, I'm number one, but everybody in America is like, well, you got to take care of number one first, and number one always meant yourself. Okay, that was the thing, and now you got President Trump talking about America first, America first.
Yeah.
But the whole point of the gospel is there's nobody first. Everybody is supposed to be treated equally. So.
I just heard from Relevant Radio, they said, that the priest said, keep the people you like close to you, but keep your enemies closer to you. I said that's
right out
hard
of
to
Hamlet.
do. That's very hard to do.
And we try, but it doesn't work. They're still doing bad things.
Well, it's also hard to be in the same room with them and breathe the same air with them if you really, really don't like them.
But again, that doesn't mean that you would mistreat them.
No,
And
it's
there's
just
that,
difficult
that's
to
the
be
difference.
around them though.
That's the difference.
We have a good heart.
So, where am I here? So if you, and so if you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do the same. So if you love others who love you, there's no credit because sinners would do that. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do the same. Now, again, he's using the word sinners to kind of shake us up. Because he could have just said, anybody would do that. But he doesn't say anybody would do that. And we know anybody would do that. But in order to kind of, pique our interest, he doesn't just say anybody, he says sinners would do that. Which means if that's all we're thinking of, that must make us sinners. So he's pushing us really hard. And that's part of this, that's part of the sermon. And if you do good to those who do, what good is that? If you lend money to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners and get back the same amount. But rather, love your enemies, do good to them, and lend expecting nothing back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, for He Himself is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful just as your Father is merciful. So, again, the whole point of being a Christian is to try and become more like God, right? And so, when you look at that, so God is kind of, and Jesus, there's the one line in Matthew that God makes the sun to shine on the good and the bad, and He lets the rain fall on the just and the unjust. And Luke turns around and says, God is merciful to those who are ungrateful. So it's more than just God treats everybody the same. But to the ones who are ungrateful, the one who turned their back on God, He's still merciful to them. So if we truly want to be, Christians, if we want to increase our spirituality, the call is for us to be more like the Father who takes the ungrateful and is good to them. So that's a huge huge poke at us, if you want. So then he looks at it from the point of view of others. So stop judging, and you just heard all these, right? Gospels at church. Stop judging and you will not be judged. Stop condemning and you will not be condemned. Forgive and you will be forgiven. So the first two are stop, which is, the first things we do, right? We judge people. We just did that here, right? We judge people and we condemn some people. And we didn't really condemn them, but those were part of the conversation. But his point of view is, if we're going to judge someone else, that means we have to open ourselves to being judged. If we're going to condemn others, then we have to open ourselves to being condemned. And we don't want to do that. And so then he puts it into the positive on two levels. So he had two negatives, now he has two positives. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and gifts will be given to you. So there's two aspects. So you have the two, stop doing this, stop doing that. And now he has two that, and the first one is not forgive because we've been forgiven. Which is what we usually think. Okay, God has given to us, and so we can give to others. God has been merciful to me, so I can be merciful to you. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. So it's almost like if we don't do this, then we can't expect to get this. And that's what comes out at the end of the Our Father, too. Which makes Luke's it's actually Matthew's Our Father that has that aspect of it. And Matthew ties the Our Father with the need to forgive. So if we do not forgive, then we will not be forgiven. So, and this is where Luke puts it. Forgiven, you will be forgiven. And then the whole thing, give and gifts will be given to you. So there is a reward, or there is a payback in a sense, but it's because we started. And this, of course, is the hardest thing for anybody to wrap their heads around is to do it first. And that, of course, is one of my aspects of stewardship is you've got to trust God. You got to walk over the edge. Because if you don't go over the edge, you'll never know that God lifts you up. Okay, you don't go over the edge because you expect God, like you're going to test God to lift you up. But if you don't trust Him to lift you up,
You will leave.
you know, and that's the thing, if you really trust that God's going to uphold you and keep you, then you go over the edge. It's that, your sister, now she's dead, I can talk about it, right? So, we started a door-to-door evangelization program at St. Francis Our Lady of the Angels many years ago. And your sister was, what, 60 or something like that at the time. I forgot how old she was. But she comes up to me, first thing she says when I start talking about it in church, "You're crazy, this is insane, you don't know what kind of neighborhood you're living in." I said, "I do know what kind of neighborhood this is, and I am crazy, and that's okay though." So
At least she agrees with you, right?
right, so I've talked about it, because you talked about this for a long time before you actually get people out the door. So that's the first time I started talking about it. She's like, "This is insane, this is stupid, you don't want to do this." And I said, "Well, we're going to try and do this anyway, and there's, you don't have to go out, just pray for us that are going out." So I'm talking about it a little bit more, and she says, "You know what, I am going to pray for you, because you're going to need those prayers, and even though I think this is a really bad idea, I'm going to be one of those people to pray for you." Wonderful, I really appreciate that. So we're getting closer to the time that we're getting ready to train people, and still talking about it, because it's a couple of months process to get to the training point. And I'm still talking about it, and then she says to me, "Well, you know what, I think I might try it once, just to see what it would be like." Well, she went out every single time we went out. And we went out 3 days a week, and she was there 3 days a week. And, at first she was only going to this, because she was from the St. Francis side. It was two parishes, St. Francis and Our Lady of Angels. So she was from the St. Francis side. She was only going to the St. Francis side. But then, like, "No, I'll do the Our Lady." Then she started getting used to it. "I'll do the Our Lady of Angels side." Every time we went out, she went out. But she wouldn't have done that if she hadn't had the chance to say, "No, this is dumb," or I can't do this," or "This is too much to ask." So, and then by expressing that, she could open herself up to the possibility that maybe it wasn't too much to ask. But we have to look at that, and that's part of the thing in the gospel here is Jesus is pushing us really hard, and we have to look at that and say, "Whoa, Lord, this is way too much." But then once we say this is way too much, they say, "Yeah, it can't be done, but maybe I can try to do this." And then we start growing in our faith. Then things are changing for us, because first we have to realize how big a change this is from what we're used to, or what is natural or normal or human. But then we start realizing that even though it doesn't seem natural, we can still do it. So, if that makes sense to you. Okay, so, and he closes that up, that given gifts will be given to you, and then he comes up, and this is one of my favorite lines, "A good measure, packed together, shaken down, and overflowing will be poured into your lap." So, you had a question? A good measure. Okay, so if you wanted to put some coffee in there, how much coffee would you put in?
Yeah.
A good measure.
A good, see again, it's like,
Because when I drop.
so if someone comes to your house and you're going to serve them, okay, and they said, "Give me a little bit," like, "I'll give you a big spoonful," because you really want this. You want to make sure that they have enough. And so that's what she's talking about, a good measure. Take a lot, like if I'm making coffee, the first thing I do is make sure that the teaspoon's not level. It's overflowing. It's a good measure, because that'll make a richer coffee. So you want a good measure, okay? And that's what he's talking about. So again, if you don't have an apron on, but if you had an apron on, that sense of, okay, so you hold up the apron and you pour things into the apron, or if you're picking apples, you hold it up and you make sure that it's filled as much as you can carry. And then when it's as much as you can carry, then you shake it down a little bit, so there's a little bit more room. So shaken together and filled up. It's like when I take the flour out of the bag and put it into the container. First the flour seems like it fills up the container. Shake the container a little bit, flour settles in, fill up the rest of it.
Yes.
You know, so shaken together, good measure, shaken together, and then will be poured into your lap. So in the sense of, you know, here's your apron or your tunic or whatever you got to hold it, as much as you can carry, as much as you can hold, will be given to you. Okay, so that's
The roses.
hmm?
The Guadalupe.
The roses with Guadalupe. Yes, that would be another example of it. So will be poured into your lap. For the measure with, now again, the measure with which you measure will in turn will in return be measured out to you. And the old phrase was, for the measure with which you measure will be measured out to you, which is just nice because it's a alliteration. But the idea behind that is, so now how do you measure other people? How do you measure your life? How do you decide what you're going to do? How do you decide who gets fed, who doesn't get fed? How do you decide who gets the dollar, who's asking for the money, and who doesn't? And so then you start thinking, okay, so how do I measure this? How do I measure the people in my life? Do I expect them to give to me first, or do I give to them first? Do I judge them based on what they're wearing, or the color of their skin, or the language they speak? Do I assess, try and assess their needs? Do I just automatically give because I think the person, needs it, or I don't give because I'm afraid that the person's going to hurt me if I open my window? All kinds of things. So what are the measures with which you use? And Jesus says that in turn will be used to measure to you. That's how they're going to measure you, in the sense of, if you go through your life afraid of everything, then you're going to be measured with fear. As opposed to if you go through your life being generous as you can be, you'll be measured with generosity. If you measure others with a certain sense of hatred, or with a certain sense of pride, or that I'm number one type of thing, then you'll find out that you're not number one. I was looking at the list of billionaires today that came out from Forbes, and so I'm going through the list, and Donald Trump is somewhere in the 700s. J.B. Pritzker is like
There's a lot
something.
of people that call
But-
themselves Christian that just
Yeah.
worship him though, like he's a god.
I know. But but like Pritzker is the governor. He's like 600 and something, and these guys are really wealthy from our point of view, but their fortunes mean nothing compared to Mark Zuckerberg or not Zuckerberg.
Bezos,
Who?
from Amazon guy.
Amazon.
Bezos.
Yeah, Bezos. Bezos is the guy. Yeah, but yeah, Zuckerberg, poor guy, lost $9 billion, which is like 3 times Donald Trump's fortune. In 1 year, he's lost $9 billion. But Zuckerberg is 130 billion. Gates is 95 billion, 96 billion, something like that. So yeah.
That's one of you.
So those guys have real money, people like Pritzker, they just have money. Those guys have real money.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Father,
yes.
if you had to have a giver, there should be a taker.
A what?
There's always people who will take from you.
Oh, of course.
No, but again, you look at life not as what you're going to receive, but as what you can give. And again, it's the prayer of St. Francis, for it is in giving that we receive. That's really the Christian paradox. And stewardship is built on that. The paradox of Christianity is that we receive more when we give. The more we give, the more we receive. The more we love, the more we are loved. And so that it's a paradox because it doesn't fit normal patterns. Normal pattern would be say, I'll respond to you. But the Christian paradox is, I will go first. Whether you're willing to make the deal with me or not doesn't matter. Because I go first, it may not come from you, but the gifts will come back to me. So it's in the sense of, one example I use all the time, so I see a need, I see somebody, and give them 20 bucks. Think, okay, fine. The person really needed it, give them 20 bucks. get by without it, no problem. And then next day or later that day, someone says, oh, Father, here, take care of somebody, gives me 20 bucks. It's like, can't give the money away. So, you know, or they just didn't get to me fast enough. You know, if somebody had given me the 20 bucks and said, take care of somebody, I would have, oh, I've got 20 bucks to take care of you.
Yeah.
Wouldn't think twice about it. But because it's my money, I have to think twice about it and say, okay, I'm going to give this to this person, trusting that it's the right thing to do. And then it comes back to me, it's like, wow, how did that happen? So, and you know, I don't like using that example in particular because it sounds cheesy, but it happens all the time. And it happens in many other ways as well. So it's just not a financial thing, but it happens in many other ways that it happens in terms of time. When I think I'm pressed for time and somebody wants time from me, and I think this is not the thing I have to give, but they need it, so I'm going to give it to them. And then all of a sudden, everything that I needed to do got done. And it's like, oh, how did that happen? I had more time. You know, I'm opening the day, worried about how much time how little time I have, and then all of a sudden I have more time than I thought I did. So it works. The Christian paradox works time and time again, but it's always based on give first. So, and then he tells him a parable. That's how the English translation says it. The Spanish says, and he gives him an example, because this isn't really a parable. A parable is a story that has a deeper level or levels of meaning. Okay? This is really an example. There's no parable. When you talk about the Good Samaritan or the prodigal son, those are parables. And they're listed as parables. But this time, it said it's a parable. It's not really a parable. He says, can a blind person guide a blind person? Will not both fall into a pit? That's an example. Okay? There's nothing unique about that or nothing special that we could call it a parable. So I don't know why they translate it that way, because as I said in Spanish, they just translate it as an example. Can a blind person guide a blind person? We know the answer to that. Will not both fall into a pit? Of course they will. So, but now he hooks the two of them up as disciple and master. So, in the sense of not just two odd people going up, walking, but now he links it to the relationship between disciple and master. So no disciple is superior to the teacher, but when fully trained, every disciple will be like his teacher. So, and this now again, he's still talking to his disciples, to us, and he says, if he were blind, the blind leading the blind would just fall into a pit, and we can't expect to be greater than him, but if we're fully trained, we will be like him. So when we fully understand what he's saying, then of course, and put it into practice, then our lives will be more like his. So then he hooks that up. Now he hooks it up in the sense of perfection and imperfection, or he hooks it up in the sense of how you see yourself and how you see others. And so now he says, why do you notice the splinter in your brother's eye, but do not perceive the wooden beam in your own? And the old translation said sliver. And sliver is actually the better word, because a splinter is anything that breaks off, right? But a sliver is something that's stuck in you. So when a splinter gets stuck in your finger, you call it a sliver. So the right word would be a sliver instead of splinter, because a splinter is out here or anything like that. But people who get stuck with a little piece of wood in them, it's like, I've got a sliver. You got to get it out.
How do you write that?
Sliver?
Yeah, please.
Silver if you're dyslexic. Oh, that is the sliver. Sorry. Sliver. Just switch the L and the I. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. We gotta take that off the tape too. Susie, remember that.
We call it stilla.
Okay. So sliver. Okay. So why do you notice the sliver in your brother's eye, but do not perceive the? And again, they say wooden beam. Plank was the old translation, and I like plank better than wooden beam simply because nobody ever puts a wooden beam in their eye, but I have been hit by a plank. And, but anyway, it's the same thing. A wooden beam and a plank are basically the same thing. It's a plank of wood. So, but not perceive a wooden beam in your own. How can you say to your brother, brother, let me remove that splinter in your eye when you do not even notice the wooden beam in your own? So, of course, if you've got this beam stuck in yours, you can't see to get the sliver out of the other person. You hypocrite, remove the wooden beam from your eye first, then you will see clearly to remove the splinter in your brother's eye. So he's hooking that up into how we judge others, how we look at others. And of course, there's always something wrong with us first. Yes?
Yeah, there's just a little practice that I do if I feel like judging someone pointing. And I tell myself, there are 3 more fingers pointing.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
So when you
Yeah.
point,
One figure out.
That's good.
Yeah. That's a good thing to remember.
Yeah, that's always a good thing to remember.
Yeah.
Whenever you're pointing at somebody else, there's always 3 more pointing back at you.
Thank you.
And then he, again, now doing this with the fruit, and this was last Sunday's gospel. So a good tree does not bear rotten fruit, nor does a rotten tree bear good fruit, for every tree is known by its own fruit. And this gets a little bit convoluted here. So the argument is still cogent, but you got to kind of splice things together, because he's using comparisons and then he's changing the comparisons. So he's talking about good fruit and rotten fruit, right? But now he's talking about picking figs from thorn bushes and grapes from brambles. And so, he's kind of shifted the comparison over. And I'm not sure if, Luke was drinking too much or what was going on. And this is the end of the sermon, and Jesus himself is like, I'm just tired here. But the things seem to be a little bit off here. So a good tree does not bear rotten fruit, nor does a rotten tree bear good fruit. That makes perfect sense, right? For every tree is known by its own fruit. Now you'd sit there and say, okay, so it's a good tree, it's got good fruit, it's rotten fruit, it must come from a rotten tree. But then he changes the whole thing and says, for people do not pick figs from thorn bushes, which of course, again, it's the same idea, but it's the same idea in a different example. So yes, every tree is known by its own fruit. This must be a fig tree because it has figs on it. And this must be a grapevine because it has grapes on it. And you don't look for grapes amongst brambles, and you don't look for figs among thorn bushes. But it just, like I said, you're just shifting the things here. It's still the same idea. A good person, and then he pulls it together and pulls it right in for us. And again, it goes back to that good tree, rotten tree thing. So that whole thing about the figs and the grapes is almost like it's thrown in there, and it really didn't need to be thrown in there, but it's there. And then he says, a good person out of the store of goodness in his heart produces good, but an evil person out of a store of evil produces evil. For from the fullness of the heart the mouth speaks. Which is a wonderful phrase, a wonderful kind of way of adding it up. So when you're talking about what's good and rotten, it's because of what's inside the heart. And of course that goes back to that line that is in Mark's gospel, that it's not what you bring into you that causes you to sin, but rather what comes out of you. That's where the sin is coming from. So, and that's that same thing, is the sin is coming from within. And if the person has a store of goodness in their heart, then they're going to do good, say good, produce good. If what's in their heart is evil, then they're going to do evil, say evil, and produce evil. So it's a very powerful way of putting it all together. 2 foundations, and then this is a wonderful way of kind of sealing this up here toward the end of the sermon. At the end of the sermon. So, why do you call me Lord, Lord? Now, so there's 2 ways of looking at it. Simply, Lord is a title, and of course you have in Jesus' day, or in even into the Middle Ages, you call certain people who are of a higher class, they'd be called lords and ladies and things like that. So you can think along that way. You watch any of the movies or any of the TV shows like Game of Thrones, it's my lord this and my lady that and all that kind of stuff. That's fine. But when Jesus is using this, obviously he's talking about this in the sense of Lord is God. So, why do you call me Lord, Lord? So, because the only one the Israelites would really call Lord is God. But they did have that same phrase. So, when you have Adonai, that translates as Lord God. So they did have that sense of a phrase, Lord, and they did use that phrase in other times, like my king, my Lord, David, my Lord, type of thing. But when he's saying it here, why do you call me Lord, Lord? He's not using it as a simple title that you might call to someone who's a better station than you. He's using it in a sense of, why do you call me God? But why do you call me Lord, Lord, but not do what I command? So even if you do it from the sense of like my Lord King, you do what the King commands, don't you? So you call me Lord, but then you don't do what I tell you to do. So
We're not perfect.
but what he's getting at is he's not going to let you go with that, because you can't call him Lord if you're not willing to submit to him. See, and that's what he's getting at. If you can't submit, then he's not really your Lord. It's like one of the I don't know where to say it yet. I'll figure it out. So he's so why do you call me Lord, Lord, but not do what I command? I will show you what someone is like who comes to me, listens to my words, and acts on them. So if you are going to listen to him and follow, which means you also act, I will show you what that person is like. Now we actually, it's still a comparison, but you might want to call this more of a parable than the other thing was. But that one is like a person building a house who dug deeply and laid the foundation on rock. And you see the change here. Now, in the other places where Jesus uses the comparison, he just says, the wise person is the person who builds his house on rock. Luke adds, digs deeply. And of course, here in Chicago, you got to go down at least 42 inches to hit permafrost, right? To go below the frost line in order to build your foundation, because you don't want the freeze of the ground to kick your house up. So foundations go at least 42 inches into the ground, because the frosty goes 36 inches into the ground. So you want to be at least 6 inches below that. So the wise person builds our house, and the other gospel just says builds our house on rock, but Luke adds digs deeply to find the rock. The Sears Tower is 300 feet, 400 feet underground. Yeah, it goes underground, taller than most buildings go up, in order to find the solid foundation. Of course, and it's right next to the river, so it's got to go deep in order to get to bedrock, in order to have that building stand and not be shaken. So that's what he's getting at. So the person, but he doesn't say this about a wise person. Now he says this about someone who really says, Lord, Lord, someone who listens to him. Okay? So if you're going to listen to him, this is what you have to do. You have to dig deep, which of course means you have to dig deep into ourselves as well, and find the rock. So when the flood came, the river burst against that house, but could not shake it because it had been well built. So, and again, the other translations, the other Gospels would simply say it had been built on rock, or it had been solidly set on rock. But this one says it had been well built. So, and of course, the difference being, because he's not really talking about the house as much as he's talking about how we build our spiritual lives. Okay, so, but the one who listens and does not act is like a person who built a house on the ground without a foundation. So didn't dig into themselves, didn't bother to find what's underneath it. They just kept everything on the surface. So, and of course, when the river burst against it, it collapsed at once and was completely destroyed. So as I said, the other Gospels would say that's a wise person, a foolish person, but he talks about this in terms of being a follower, not being a follower. To really be a follower means you have to dig deep into yourself and find the foundation of your life is in Christ. And if you're just listening to him but not acting upon what he says, then, you know, being a Christian is just on the surface. And what happens to Christians who just live on the surface? There's a scandal in the church and they leave. The priest says something they don't like and they leave. Somebody turns to them and looks at them the wrong way and they leave. And, you know, that's...
They leave the
They
church
don't-
period,
Right,
or
and
they go to a different.
They go to different churches, and I know some people who come back to the Catholic Church after having been to like 5 or 6 other churches.
Yeah.
But the reason they went to 5 other 6 churches is because every time they went somewhere, they got insulted or they got hurt or somebody said the wrong thing, and so they kept church hopping because their faith was just here.
Yeah.
And then finally they realized what they really had was in the Catholic Church was on solid rock. Because it didn't depend on the priest, it didn't depend on
It depends on her.
the community, it depended on Christ.
But what do you do when you're going to a church and you don't like what the person says? And what do you do? You're not supposed to go to another church, you're just supposed to just stay there and take it?
Well, there's a couple of things you can do. So, my sister, when she was married and living in Central Illinois, she had problems with the priest who was there. I don't know exactly what her problem with him was, but she just didn't like the guy. The problem was the guy was pastor of 3 different parishes, so for her to find another parish and another priest meant she was driving like 100 miles to get to church, because he had every parish within 50 miles.
The situation is, it doesn't.
Well, but that's what I'm saying. So there's different things happen in different situations. So yeah, you know. So ultimately, at first she just stopped going to church, and then after I became a priest, she went back to church, and then she realized that maybe he wasn't as bad as she thought he was. But it took her a while. At first, she had to pull away, and then see that maybe there's another perspective. So it could be time.
Is it really a bad thing if you pull away, if you're just so uncomfortable with the person, you know, you're just nervous around that person all the time?
It's not necessarily a bad thing, but again, it's where's the foundation? Is the foundation in the gospel? Is the foundation in the preacher? The foundation in the gospel is the foundation in the choir. The foundation in the gospel is the foundation in the person who greets you at the door.
But the only thing they talk about the bad things they see from the priest, but they don't never talk what good things they see.
And that's what she started to find. That,
Yeah.
you know, it's
You
easy
can
enough.
make one mistake, they don't see the 99% they do.
Well, exactly. You can
That's
catch me on a bad day, and I'm a really horrible
Exactly,
person.
it's
It
not.
doesn't even have to be a priest, it could be
You
anyone.
can catch me on that one good day a year,
I know
and
you,
I'm
Father.
really great.
I first,
But it's only once a year, so.
I see your face first to talk to you. I say, no, for real.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's in good mood, okay.
What I was gonna say was, it doesn't even have to be the priest or the pastor, it can
Yeah,
be just
but
another
now
church
we have
member.
Well, I know, but that's the thing. So, but then and the nice thing about being in a city like Chicago is there are lots of churches, but you know, there's less churches now than there were 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, when I was growing up, there were 454 churches in the Archdiocese of Chicago. Now there's 300.
Because if you're going to church to feel good about yourself too, and then you're in a church where somebody that you can't stand, it's just like.
Well, but
Can
everything
be
is not.
inspiring.
But again, there's always ways of looking at it. There's always ways around it. If there was the only service of the day, that'd be one thing. But if you know they go to the 11:15, go to the 7:45. Seriously, I mean, there are ways around things, and there's also ways of getting over things that may be terrible. That finally, 10 years later, it's like, oh, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. And even I grow on people. Like moss, even I grow on people after a while. So. Yeah.
Listen us.
I'd like to say one thing. I've been in the parish for many, many years, and I think of this as my parish. So if there's something going on that I don't approve of, I have to put up with it. If I can do something, fine, but otherwise, I'm not gonna be chased away from my parish for anything that's going on. Don't let people chase me away. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, this is your parish, and if you wanna stay here, that's fine. You'll find a nice, comfortable spot, stay here.
Well, I was talking about a person from another church, and I was just giving an example.
But again, an example might also be though, the thing is, can you pray them? Because if you can't pray, that's a different story. And certainly my style of preaching or my style of celebrating Mass might be good for some people, it might not be good for others. It might be okay for a vast number of people, really, really good for a few people, and really, really bad for a few. So, it's like for the vast number, you say, well, it's fine. He doesn't sing as well as Father Sammy, but he's got a few other redeeming qualities, so we can put up with that. Okay, fine. At least I know when I'm singing really bad. So, and I apologize for it because when it happens. But but if you really can't pray, then then you find a church where you can pray. And I always tell people, make sure you can sit and pray in a church. Some people can't pray in a church because it's too loud, too boisterous. Some people can't pray in a church because the way the preacher preaches.
Sound system is one of them too.
Right. Well, and again, some things can be fixed, So first thing I got here, one of the first things everybody was saying to me, the sound system needs to be fixed. And so I fixed it right away. And the biggest reason is because I don't like to talk if I'm not going to be heard. What's the point?
That's exactly.
I don't need to talk. But that's again, I had a pastor when I was in high school and in college. We had a pastor who was afraid to talk, so he didn't mind the fact that nobody could hear him because he didn't want to talk.
Well, the first time I came to the city, I met St. Viator, and I was there for 1 month, and I had to sit at different locations just to find a spot that I can actually, the echo is just too much, and I cannot, I said, I have to go to church, I have to be in spot, I have to listen to the word of God. And I couldn't, so after 1 month, I just gave up.
Yeah, and that happens. But you have to be able to pray when you're in church. And so when you find a place that you can pray, especially when there's a community that you start building your life around, then you want to stay there. And you don't want somebody kicking you out, whether it's another parishioner or one of the ministers or whomever. You want to claim what's yours because you're just as much a part of the community as anybody else. Okay, so that's it. We're running late, so we're going to stop there. We're not going to get into chapter 7. I thought we were going to get through chapter 7 too. Okay, this was one of the night. We had way too many comments. not enough scriptures. That's fine. We need to do that. Okay, so and this is the healing of the centurion's son is really good too. So we're going to stop here and pick up after Easter, okay, and move from there. But at least we got through all the gospels that we heard up till now, so that's a good thing.
No class next week.
No class next week.
Then you're
I'm out of town actually for a week. What was that? But
You're gonna go vacation?
I'm on vacation next week, yeah. But we're going to wait till after Easter because things are happening throughout Lent, and so it becomes hard to maintain a schedule in Lent because of different things happening. So then we'll wait till after Easter to pick up again. And the Lenten season, the readings don't really, because we have so many people who receive sacraments here. We always use the cycle A readings, so we're not really picking into the Luke Gospel. We'll do the first 2 Sundays. You do the Temptations out of Luke's Gospel, which we already had, and then you do the Transfiguration, which is much later. Those are always the first 2 Sundays of Lent, and then we go into the cycle A readings. So it's the woman at the well, the man born blind, the raising of Lazarus, which all come from John's Gospel, and then we get to the Passion of Luke for Palm Sunday. But we'll pick up right after Easter and start picking up again with that and move forward from there.